But still, the Malaysian government is under increasing pressure from people over the rising cost of living and inflation.
Turun, 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 turun. Harga barang, harga barang.
Hello everyone, Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm NURFARAH BINTI. The government has taken progressive actions in changing budgeting mechanisms towards performance-based budgeting. However, the issue of mismanagement in budgeting is certainly nothing new in Malaysia, and it continues to plug throughout the years in the public sector, impacting degradation in the government's good governance and as a result ruining the country's image. The general report addressed concerns such as government overspending, mishandling of public funds in the public sector, and non-compliance with government regulations and procedures. Despite government efforts to address the issues, it is still insufficient for a change of national budgetary management. So Malaysian, what say you about this?
Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim says national debt, including liabilities, has hit 1.5 trillion ringgit and steps must be taken to immediately address it. According to a Bernama report, Anwar, who is also Finance Minister, said the figure has exceeded 80% of the country's gross domestic product or GDP. He said the budget deficit is estimated at about 5.8% of GDP in 2022 and that this year's fiscal position won't be comfortable.
Hi, my name is NABILA and I will discuss about the issue of overspend from the Malaysian government expenditure. Do you know that Malaysia's high inflation rate of 2.2% is due to the government's overspending? This is because the Centre for Market Education CME said the additional money supply created by the expansive fiscal policies has worsened the risk of inflation and potentially threatens the country's economic recovery. Thus, the lockdown from the pandemic also have caused the supply-side shocks to increase transport and commodity prices. The current inflation is the result of government overspending and monetary mismanagement. One of the overspending cases is the Ministry Secretary General, Azman Muhammad Yusof, approved the subsidy totaling about RM 9 million ringgit to over 20 companies, even though the quota has already been exhausted, which it lead to the overspending of government expenditure. Therefore, the government should balance its fiscal budget by cutting back on expenditures for the next few years. Furthermore, the overspending from the government expenditure will lead to the rising of national debt. One of the case is the unchecked overspending by the Prime Minister's office, and disproportionate allocation of development funds have led to the official government debt fast approaching to 700 billion ringgit Malaysia. A recent report by the Age Markets revealed that going by an annual growth rate of 10.7%, Malaysia's debt could reach 1 trillion ringgit Malaysia by 2031 on excessive spending. By the same projection, Malaysia's debt could reach 2 trillion ringgit Malaysia in 2028 and 3 trillion ringgit Malaysia in 2032. Therefore, the allocation to the Prime Minister office should be slashed to lower rising debt. It is because long-term neglect of the nation's high public debt will increase the possibility of default.
Assalamualaikum, I am Siti JALILAH binti Muhammad. The issue of non-compliance with the rules of procedure set by the government, which is the lack of proper planning for programs, projects and activities, always happen in our society. The Newsweek Times that was published on 16 February 2023 shows that ADS reports reveal findings on government expenditure totaling 66.8 billion. The Auditor General's report for 2021 details 7 performance audits that involve government spending of 66.8 billion on operations carried out by 7 ministries. Although some shortcomings were discovered, such as output targets and specified outcomes that were not entirely accomplished, the federal government's operations, projects and programs had been implemented in accordance with the established objective. Some of the issues resulted from a failure to follow government regulation or processes or from improper planning of programs, projects and activities. Therefore, the Auditor General has put forward 21 recommendations to be considered for implementation by the audited ministry, departments and agencies. The audit on the management of federal government's companies focused on the achievement of each company's establishment objective by examining 3 aspects, namely activity management, corporate governance and the company's financial position. So, is it possible to make the right planning for programs, projects and activities with those 3 aspects?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Raudhah binti KAMALUDIN. The issue of mismanagement of public funds among the public sector is becoming more prevalent nowadays. This can be seen from one of the news Straits Times that was published on 27 January 2023 regarding the fund mismanagement that was detected by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. The news explained that 133 business owners and directors have been arrested by the MACC last year on suspicion of misappropriating and leaking government cash and aids. According to Datuk Seri Ahmad Husairi Yahya, the Deputy Chief Commissioner for Operations at the MACC also stated that more than 100 businesses have been investigated for stealing cash totaling roughly 194 million ringgit Malaysia. Besides, there is also another government mismanagement issue in handling public funds that resulted in 158 ringgit Malaysia million losses through the irregular payments and wastages, according to the Auditor General's Report 2021. It can be seen that PDRM, KECO, MAFI and the Ministry of Defence made an unauthorized payments totaling 26.03 million ringgit Malaysia by using public funds. PDRM improperly paid 17.76 million ringgit Malaysia for services related to a contract for printing and mailing police summons that was given to an unnamed company and had a contract value of 45 million ringgit Malaysia. It claimed that the PDRM had already paid the business before it had printed and sent the summon notice as required. Not to forget, the Auditor General also stated that the Road Transport Department Malaysia JPJ had ordered 1.83 million Malaysian driving license worth 14.23 ringgit Malaysian million, which were never being used in relation to the 15.1 million ringgit Malaysia parked under the wastages of public funds. So Malaysians, do you think the public sector plays their role in handling public funds?
Assalamualaikum Doctor, I'm NAZURAH from AM2285H. I would like to ask your opinion regarding regarding about government overspending that led to huge national debt.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I think it is actually very important to clarify here that to what extent or why the issue of the government is overspending. So I think we must realize that any spending will affect to the our GDP, and of course if you too much spend compared to your income, it will contribute to the large deficit, and of course too much deficit also is not good to the any nation. But then at the same time, if you are not spending or you are trying to control so much in terms of spending, this is also not good for the economy. So because the government spending is actually very important to make sure that the economy is actually grow and circulate, so meaning that if you are actually too much spending, I'm afraid that will also give effect in terms of debt. So but then if you can manage the spending, okay, with additional resources and additional income, I don't think there is actually a problem for the government to spend. So likewise, the 2023 budget that been presented by Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, I think early this year, so many that claim that this is actually the biggest budget ever. But then I think the budget that is actually been tabled is actually pro-rakyat. So I think for me personally, I have no problem with that, because at the end, the budget that been tabled or the spending that been tabled is actually for the benefit of the rakyat. The matter is that we must make sure that that budget is not mismanaged, and then of course there is no hanky-panky in terms of corruption and whatnot. Then I think government should know better how to deal with the national debt ratio. Okay, currently, if I'm not mistaken, 50%, 55 to 60%, I think. So if they can maintain with the limit that approved by the parliament, then should be no problem.
Okay. For the next question, what do you think on how well managed is the government's use of public funds?
Public fund is actually a matter of accountability for the government, and then to make sure that they manage that fund very well. So now I believe that the current government by Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim under the Malaysia Madani concept play a very and emphasize very much on the importance of the public fund must be spent wisely, must have the outcome and impact towards the rakyat. And the most important thing is that whenever that you are dealing with public fund, the public fund must be used and must be managed with accountability, and then of course there is no corruption, there is no mismanagement and misuse of funds. So I think this is actually very important, especially to all the civil servant, to all the anyone in the public civil servant, and of course all the rakyat must take this very seriously because everyone have their own roles. For the rakyat, they must make sure that if they found out and then if they know that there are mismanagement or misuse of power or whatnot, they must go come in front and report these all things to the authorities. And for the civil servant, they must realize that they are actually holding the responsibility of the rakyat, and then they must deliver their tasks very diligently to make sure that the fund is actually managed properly and wisely. Okay.
Thank you for your time and your opinion, Doctor.
Okay, thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is NURFARAH and BINTI YAHAYA. I will continue to summarize the video excerpt opinions. So the first question is about what your opinion about government overspending lead to huge national debt. So based on Dr. Mazdan's opinions, it is important to extend and why the issue of the government of overspending. We must realize that any spending will impact to our GDP's country. As we know, if we too much spend compared to your own income, it will lead to greater deficit. Although when too much deficit is not good to any country, meanwhile at the same time when you are trying to control so much in terms of spending money, also not good to our economy. So, as we know, the government spending is important to make sure that the economy grow efficiency. If we too much spending, it also give effect to government debt. Henceforth, if we can manage the amount of spending with additional income or resources, it maybe should not be problems for the government to spend. For instance, in 2023 budget, Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim that represented earlier this year too many claim of the biggest budget. The budget is actually can benefits to all such poor rakyat, and there should not be problem because it will benefits to all citizens in Malaysia too. To conclude, if we know to manage the spending of money, the budget not mismanaged, and there is no antipathy of corruption, government should know how to deal with the national debt ratio. So to summarize it, the government will maintain the limits that approved by Parliament, then it can proceed further. So we must balance our spending money to make sure that our economy is stabilized. That's all from me. I will pass to the next of opinions.
Assalamualaikum, my name is NURUL NAZURAH binti Jamal. I will continue to summarize the next question regarding to the video except opinions. So the second question is about what their opinion on how well managed is the government's use of public funds. So based on Dr. Mazlan's opinions, he believed that the importance of accountability in managing public funds, and he also highlights that Malaysia's current Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim places a strong emphasis on managing public funds wisely, with outcomes and impacts for the people. He also mentioned that the need for accountability and the avoidance of corruption, mismanagement and misuse of funds. It encouraged civil servants to take their responsibilities seriously and deliver their tasks diligently, as they hold the responsibility to the people. Besides, Dr. Mazlan also stated that the people are urged to report any mismanagement or misuse to the relevant authorities. To conclude, government and public funds must be aligned to ensure the proper functioning of a nation. The public finances act as a platform for the government to provide essential services to its citizens, including healthcare, education, law enforcement, and public infrastructure. It is a well-known fact that the government plays a significant role in the allocation of public funds in any country. It is therefore imperative for the government to manage public funds in the most efficient and effective manner to achieve economic growth and development. That's all from me. Thank you. All in all, it is hoped that the new government under Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim can combat the issues of budgetary mismanagement in Malaysia efficiently and effectively and bring transformation in the management of public expenditures. Good governance brings good life. That's all. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.